Hey all, so welcome to another episode of Film Recommendations. In this episode we're going to be talking about Carol's Second Act, the CBS sitcom about a mother of an adult child who's had her career and lived her life and decided that she finally wants to live her dream and go into medicine. Now, they basically gave you the premise to this in the first couple of minutes of the show, as well as on every advertisement. And it's a bit of an odd duck when it comes to storylines, because usually a lot of sitcoms are about younger people living with older people in a kind of family situation. Usually the story will center a bit more around home, but this one entirely centers around work. It's one of those work-centered comedies, which, you used to see way back in the day, like 9 to 5, Car Wash, and many others. Well, anyway, Patricia Heaton plays the titular Carol, Carol Kenny, who is a recent divorcee whose daughter is an adult and working as a pharmacological rep there at the hospital and at several other area hospitals, but gets to see her mom regularly as just going around trying to market the different medications that her company offers to the doctors of the different departments. Well, she has to deal with a very difficult supervising physician named Dr. Maya Jacobs, played by Ito Agayeri. And I apologize if I butchered that pronunciation. It's a lovely name. But she's not the only intern there. She also has Dr. Daniel Kutcher, Caleb, and Dr. Lexi Gilani as her co-interns who help practice medicine around their little level of the hospital. And Kyle MacLachlan plays Dr. Stephen Frost, who, despite his name, is actually quite warm-hearted, sweet, and very open and genuine, especially with Carol as an older professional. Anyway, so without going into a lot of the details of the different stories, as every episode has its own set of challenges, our different characters that we encounter basically go through different methods of practice, such as dealing with someone who's a hypochondriac, dealing with someone who's not just a patient but a friend, while also dealing with someone who's very difficult to work with. There are lots of these different levels to each story, and it ends up working out pretty well overall. So far there are 18 episodes. I watched roughly 6, but 6 episodes is enough that you've got a sense of who everyone is by that point. Caleb, for example, is kind of a liberal, postmodern kind of person. He introduces himself by also giving his pronouns, and that's meant to be a joke on his character, like, oh, he feels the need to give his pronouns. What a goober or whatever. Meanwhile, Dr. Daniel Kutcher is vain and thinks he's super hot, and they kind of dial that down over the course of the first 6 episodes anyway. And very often the way that a sitcom is produced is they'll produce a pilot, then they'll screen that pilot to a few people, and it may take some months before they get all of their feedback process and decide what they're going to do with the show. Sometimes they may reshoot the pilot or just reshoot certain parts, occasionally with a different actor in case an actor has to opt out rather, and can't fulfill the series agreement, which happens sometimes. There are stories of this all over the place. Anyway, because they kept the cast small down to just 8 main characters and the occasional character that you might see for a one-off episode, such as a patient or a guest star playing a patient or what have you, this ends up being a relatively tightly run show, and they're able to really put together a decent story from one episode to the next. It's full of lots of little cute moments and lots of little jokes, as well as an overarching story that teaches you a bit of a lesson and shows a little bit of a journey for the character. Well, anyway, it's really surprisingly quite good. I would basically compare it to Scrubs, but with a little bit less surrealism, a little bit less of a cutaway gag kind of deal, like you often had on Scrubs, where it was kind of doing the Family Guy thing of cutting away to some kind of little fantasy or whatever. And it also seems to be filmed in front of a live audience. They don't say it is, I don't think. It's also possible that they just turn up the laugh track and then turn it back down. It's entirely possible they do that, or maybe they record it when it's being shown and then have that just queued up to come in. I don't know exactly, but I know you also have to mic the audience in order to get the sound of them laughing and whatnot ready to go like that. But with that said, it tends to be a pretty fun show. Each episode does bring about new developments. The different characters do kind of reset from episode to episode, so they aren't really that changed. But in all, they do kind of grow as people, at least in the episode's context. It's not a repetitive show is kind of the thing. You don't see the characters doing the same exact thing from week to week. They also have a pretty good medical consultant on the show giving you the input for each story so that every diagnosis, every explanation is somewhat based in fact. So they aren't giving you a bunch of gobbledygook and medical jargon, and then you take that and research it and try and maybe talk with your doctor about it and get laughed at, because that kind of stuff can actually be quite irresponsible. So every medical show, after a certain point, they started saying, well, let's be a bit more careful about what we do with our technical jargon on all this. We don't want people getting the wrong idea about a particular medical condition, such as cardiomyopathy. Well, with that said, I do have to say that some of the best interactions are between your main characters. Patricia Heaton, Ito Agayeri, I'm so sorry, Ito Agayeri, and Kyle MacLachlan tend to be the three best performers on the show, and that's good, because you want a really good opposite number who's kind of the supervisor, even though she's younger. So anyway, Dr. Carol, is someone who's bringing with her a lifetime of experience from years of being a middle and high school science teacher, raising children, working, studying, living a full life, and then coming to this field. So she tends to bring some of the soft skills that are needed for a good bedside manner, a certain amount of trustworthiness with the patient, and also understanding that it doesn't hurt to provide some basic needs in order to make the person feel a little bit more at ease. In one particular episode, she first provides the wife of the patient with first a pen to write down some notes on the various things that she needs to know, and then later with a hair tie, which, a simple little thing, but if you need it, then you need it, and it doesn't hurt to just have a few spares around. You can afford it. One thing that I didn't care for was in one episode, Daniel, because they refer to people mostly by first names in this, Daniel Kutcher accidentally eats Dr. Jacobs' blueberry muffin, and he tries to replace it, but the cafeteria is out of muffins. So he ends up getting her one muffin that has bran and cranberries, and she throws that away. Then she He gets a regular muffin and some blueberries, and then he throws both of those away. And my only problem with that is that that's a waste of food. If you aren't going to eat them, set them down somewhere else where someone else will enjoy them. They actually keep a bowl of apples. Just set the muffin near that. Or put the muffins that you don't want in the break room. They have a break room, so just put them in that. And, mark it free muffins or whatever, or free blueberries, or just free snacks. And people will happily take from that bag because, hey, free snacks. Well, anyway, Nurse Dennis kind of comes in and out when they need another character who's also stern. He's played by Cedric Yarbrough, who you probably remember from a whole bunch of other shows. And he does a really good job of being kind of a hot and cold number, if you will. He plays it cool and calm and stern and authoritarian when he has to, because he has authority over the interns as well in the hierarchy of the department. But when he needs to be silly, when he needs to be sweet, when he actually knows that these interns do care about the patients, he does soften up a little bit to them. And that was actually something I liked. Dr. Jacobs has to be hard. Dr. Frost does not, because he's not directly responsible for these interns. Nurse Dennis does have to be hard, but doesn't have to be 100% of the time, because he also has to work with the patients. And that's usually a nurse's top priority, is not how this is going to look for the doctor, not how this is going to look for the hospital necessarily, but are the patients receiving the best possible care that they can provide? Well, anyway, that may not be true in every hospital or every department, but it is true in the case of Nurse Dennis. He actually does care. I also like the fact that they don't just bother having a male nurse, but bother having a big, hulking, beefy male nurse. He's not just some trim, slim guy. He's not just some, blank slate. He actually has a fair amount of character to him, and you need an actor like Cedric Yarbrough to bring that. So he ends up being a really good sort of middle character who isn't a doctor and isn't an intern and isn't a patient, and can kind of rein things in a little bit and be a good foil, a good opposite number, a good straight man for some parts, and a good comic relief for other parts. He has that flexibility, whereas most of the time Dr. Carroll, is a bit more the funny character. None of the characters in this show are necessarily exclusively funny. When they have to be serious, they absolutely are. And one aspect I like is that for different scenes, when they're having to play it completely straight, Patricia Heaton really does bring the intensity, so that if she's playing opposite Cedric Yarbrough or playing opposite Jean-Luc Bilodeau, oh my goodness, or Sabrina Jallies, who plays Lexi Jelani, the Hispanic lesbian of the show. I think she's Hispanic in the show. Anyway, they do an interesting job of actually making it, okay, time to be serious, let's all be serious. Yeah, we joke when we're not in front of the patients. Yeah, we might hassle each other, but when we're dealing with the patients, it's about the patients. Yeah, so in other words, it's a pretty good show. It's pretty well written. I like the casting. If you're looking for something light and agreeable that has a bit of an interesting flair to it and some good material to chew on, you can do a lot worse. It ends up being pretty entertaining and thought-provoking. I think it has some good lessons for both young and old alike. It tends to feel a bit like a show you might expect to see in the 80s, just because in the late 70s, early 80s, there did tend to be these sitcoms that were about adults and dealt with adult topics, but did try to be somewhat family friendly, and more importantly, tended to have a resolution where something about humanity was said, some kind of lesson. I'm thinking of like your Night Court, your Barney Miller, or your All in the Family and whatnot. Very often, a lot of episodes would have these sort of revelations about something that they hadn't understood about how to get along in the real world, how to work, how to negotiate things with a colleague. For one example, the muffin that I mentioned, all the while, Dr. Kutcher is trying to figure out, well, what the heck is with this muffin? And Dr. Jacobs explains that in a given week, any given day, she will not know what the heck will happen. But every Wednesday morning, she sets herself the priority of having a blueberry muffin from the cafeteria simply because it gives her something to anchor to, something that she recognizes and is familiar, when everything else is a whirlwind, a maelstrom, if you will. So it ends up feeling like a pretty solid story when they actually put enough thought like that into some character development, some aspect to who that person is. Even if it's just for one episode, you get to understand, okay, that's what this is all about. That's why they feel this way. That's why they are who they are. It's that emotional intelligence that informs the show and makes it feel like a stronger, more well-rounded and centered series of short stories about these characters. It ends up feeling a little bit different from shows like MASH or the aforementioned Scrubs or even ER, and instead feels like its own unique element. And I hope you'll check it out. It is a pretty fun show with a pretty well-rounded cast and a decent cast of characters who all have interesting interactions and pretty well-thought-out dialogue, even if it gets a bit ridiculous at times. But I think the characterizations and the clashes are what make for good drama, and also good comedy, when people who don't really get along all that well are kind of forced to work together. You can often find a lot of good humor in those situations. Anyway, thanks for watching. If you want to, hit like or subscribe, ding the bell for updates, follow me on Facebook or Twitter for social media, and I'll hope to catch you next time. And if you wish to donate, I'm on Patreon and Cash App. Take care. Bye.